Well, good evening, everyone. And once again, welcome to another episode of the Political Consciousness of West Coast Steeler Fan, or as we call it here on Monday evenings, to an imperfect union. One of the things that has really stuck in my craw, so to speak, this week um, is the way that people have been talking about the John Lewis Act. This is very confusing to me. As a young man, what, 18 years old, 1965, in the state of New Jersey, um, I thought when Lyndon LBJ, I'll do a Bill Carroll here, Lyndon Baines Johnson, um, signed that piece of paper on black and white TV because we didn't have color yet. And I believe we still only had three stations. So this was monumental. I mean, the president signs bill on national TV assuring voting rights. Uh, my grandmother and grandfather rejoiced. Of course, we couldn't vote. I couldn't vote until I was 21. But portions of my family, especially those in the South, um, which I hadn't really been in contact with, but uh, in talking with others that had come up from down south within a relative few number of years, um, I saw how important it was for them to vote. I had heard the stories about, how many beans in a jar, write the First Amendment to the Constitution, maybe, all kinds of ridiculous things that you had to go through, intelligence tests in order for you to vote. So in 1965, I thought that this was the last thing that we would have to continuously go through. Excuse me, wrong way. um, and then later, after coming back home, uh, within 2 years, I had my first contacts with law enforcement as a veteran. Within 3 years after that, I would be a convicted felon. And the one thing that concerned me was losing my right to vote. And of course, between 1972 and the passing of the three strike law, I had accumulated four strikes. But a funny thing happened. I look on the TV. Now the TV's colored. There's more than one station. Still haven't had cable yet. No, wait a minute. Let me think. Because this was Bush. So yeah, we had cable, we had the internet, we had all those things. I don't think we had Facebook yet, but anyway, we had the beginnings of the internet. We had Facebook, and we had the beginnings of the internet. We had, I believe, then we were in the AOL phase. But anyway, I see Bush signing a voting rights bill. I'm like, okay, well, I've been locked up for a few years intermittently here and there, and I haven't kept up with the political situation because I don't have the right to vote. Excuse me. But once again, thinking to myself, here's another president that signed the Voting Rights Act bill. So these are things that we do not have to pursue. We have this. Now we can talk about, excuse me, now we can talk about jobs, economic wealth, all these things, because we have secured the right to vote. So imagine how perplexed I am in 2022, and people are still fucking with my right to vote. Now, I have spent most of my life, with the exception of being in the service, and in places where my right to vote was never challenged. I lived in Pennsylvania. I lived in New Jersey. I lived in Ohio. And surprisingly enough, one of the small towns around our metropolitan community was very much known for Klan activity. And for to a certain degree, it was it was a sundown town. You kind of knew it. This was not a place where you wanted to be after dark. Uh, Let me see if I can send Dr. Casey a new link. Okay. Wrong link. I know. Okay, let me send out there. Uh, Let me see here. Excuse me one moment here. I'm trying to get a couple people in. I apologize. Let's go. Uh, okay, I need here. Okay, so let's. Excuse me. I'm trying to get some people in here. Okay, let's try that one here. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So, as I was saying here, as I was saying about the getting back about the right to vote, um, and even in my little metropolitan area, although as I mentioned, this one particular town um, was actually a KKK haven for northeastern Ohio. But my aunt had been in, what do you call them, alderman or something like that. I believe that was the title. Uh, and she was also a precinct committee woman, which meant that she, when it was time for elections, that she went out and actually distributed literature or uh, talked to our favorite candidates. So, uh, good evening, Dr. Casey. How are you this evening?
I'm doing pretty good in yourself.
I'm doing fine. Now, I know you said you. I'm looking at this little black dress here. Are you just coming back home, or what's going on
This is not a black dress. This is a shirt.
there?
I actually have on my little onesie, but I didn't want to wear my onesie, so I just took the onesie part off, and I have a shirt on. A little back.
uh, but I, we are going to get to our talk about religion, but I'm gonna kind of lead into it while heaping a whole lot of shit on top of it. Excuse
Okay.
me.
I mean, no, a lot of everything goes into religion and plays a part. Religion plays a part in forcing us, conditioning us, and coaxing us into thinking certain ways and believing certain things and moving, even in political stances, um, on a certain path line.
Right. And I'm talking about the John Lewis Act here because, as I said, as a young man in 1965, black and white TV, we got, you know, president signing the Voting Rights Act on TV. Only got three stations, so you got to watch him. I mean, so it wasn't like you really had a choice. But so Dr. King and them walked across the bridge. I- Is that you? Anyway, Dr. Luther King them walked across the bridge. They done got bit by the dogs. They've been fire hosed down. Everybody's saying we shall overcome, and damn, there's a white man signing it on TV. So this is settled. We're done. We're good. I come back from Vietnam, and in less than 3 years, I'm a convicted felon, so I've lost my right to vote. I'm a little upset here because I've seen all the struggles that my aunt and like for my parents and all that. I've seen all this that they've went through. So losing the right to vote was kind of important, but hey, what's done is done, and boom. So
Have you been able to get your record expunged?
yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. But after getting my that's a different story. But in 1972, no, excuse me, 1982,
Oh,
I'm
that's when I
looking.
was born.
I'm looking on TV again. I got a few alternatives now. No, not so good, but I got some alternatives now. PBS and stuff didn't caught up. So I see another guy named Bush signing another voting rights act. Okay, well, I haven't been allowed to vote yet, and it's my 7 years haven't passed, so I can't get my record expunged. Da, da, da. So I kind of lose track of it. Like this is twice that it's happened in my lifetime. Voting rights has been passed. Da, da, da. We don't have to worry about that no more. Now we can concentrate on education and economics and becoming homeowners and all those other little things that they kind of pushed into our mind. Now, this is where religion comes in because during both of those times, the place for you to go and vote was a church. That was where you went to vote. That's where you went on Sunday morning or whenever. But that was where you went to. Good evening, Bill. How are you?
Just fine. I was on at like 7:55. What's going on?
I, you may have been on the sports crib, but that's all right because I
Well,
said
it said to an imperfect union.
that. Well, as everyone knows, Dr. Casey and everyone knows, I do when I put I might have a couple weeks in advance, so that's nothing that really comes into play there. But anyway, uh, going on about my story about the Voting Rights Act, back in those days, Bush and even before Lyndon Johnson, where you went to church to register. And usually when you registered, you were going, you had a little list. I mean, it may or may not have been prominently displayed outside the church what candidates they wanted you to vote for and so forth and so on. So now I'm thinking, as about a 40-year-old now, I'm thinking, okay, well, voting rights is done. And I've always lived in states like I lived in, New Jersey, I lived in Ohio, um, Now I'm out here in California, but I've never been anywhere where my right to vote was suppressed. I've never been anywhere where if I'm standing in line to vote, no one couldn't give me a bottle of water. No, you know, if me and so are standing out there, and somebody walks by and say, you want a bottle of water, you want, a sandwich, how long you been? There's nobody out there, like say, hey, get away, or nobody. There's none of this. So s- seeing and going through this again in 2022,
Yep.
and once again, I don't care if you're evangelical. I don't care if you're Baptist. I don't care if you're Southern Baptist. Your minister is once again influencing your vote. And in some places, the places that you go to vote and the place that you go to register to vote are the church. So while we were all singing, We Shall Overcome, somehow my right to vote 50 years later is still in peril.
Mhm.
So, Dr. Casey, you know, I always mention, like I said, like the most influential places within most minority communities in the past has been the church. What
Well,
is what's your thought?
my grandmother was actually a person who worked in and helped people register to vote. Like I remember sitting in the office with her, like campaigning and doing it was city officials that she used to campaign with and be involved with. So what they have going on in Georgia is really just a scare tactic, a fear tactic, anything that's going to discourage people because they know the lines are long. They know that people bring food, water. I mean, they bring pizzas to the voting places. They do everything to encourage people to vote. But they also know that the numbers, um, if we vote, will dominate. So it is best for them to find a way to disqualify us or deter us even. And then when you talk about the church and its influence on how you vote, you got to think how most politicians will pander churches. They will go and, like, okay, I'm going to go to this church and I'm going to visit a black church to show black people that I can go to a black church. Like, that really doesn't prove anything, but church people um get a kick out of it. It's like some people want to they like to be patted on the back or given some type of um they like that acknowledgement even if it's nothing, if it has no substance to it. They just like the quick smooth over. They like the swept up under the rug and it looked clean but it's not really clean. And that's what really tears us up. And as long as you think that you're just going to obey the laws of the land, as the Bible instructs, then it keeps you kind of stifled because you think you can't challenge it or you can't, buck.
Interesting words you use there. You can't buck. uh, but Bill, you got back just in time here. I wanted
That's
to
what I
kind
was planning.
of,
Yep.
I wanted to kind of get your thoughts here. On the John Lewis Act. Why are we still at this particular stage in 2022?
Well, there's a lot of things I can say, but I can show you better than I can tell you.
But
That's your
that
answer.
oh no, no, wait a minute. That's what we said when I was 18 in
Mhm.
1965.
And it's
It
what they said in 1865, and they said in 1765. And they were right every single time.
no,
Probably
no,
said
no,
it
no, no,
BC too.
because no, because once I did this, I became a racist. It's, it's,
So to put, oh, and there's a book I highly want to recommend. But to put it in, I mean, obviously, I was putting it in the simplest terms possible, so I guess I'll elaborate more. Since all of the rights that we have, right, the three of us and those who are like the three of us, all stem from legislation that happened at the end of the Civil War. And even at the time that they were creating, saying, "Oh yeah, yeah, y'all birth, birthright citizenship and all that stuff." People forget, or some people forget, that birthright citizenship exists because of us, right? Um, and then Native people were like, "Wait, but what? Hey, right? Well, we didn't mean you. We meant other people born here." But what you have to remember is that even at the time, it was tremendously controversial, making us people, right? Not just in the South. There were lots of Northerners, even abolitionists, who were not like, wait, we're gonna let them vote. I mean, I would like to make sure that it's understood. It wasn't just in the South that people were not all on board. There were lots of Northerners, including abolitionists, who were like, well, we didn't want them to be slaves, but we sure as heck didn't want them to be equal, right? So at the beginning, right, there's a legal term, they call it eating the fruit of the poison tree. Since this thing, at its very beginning, frankly, was on shaky ground, James, right? At no point was this on a solid, like rock solid foundation where it's like, y'all are good. It's going to be fine. Don't you worry. Never. Not at the beginning, not in the middle, and not at the end. And at no point will it ever probably be fully solidified. We're going to be fighting this as long as we exist here.
I
So
I
get to that, James.
I believe what are your thoughts on this, because I believe that it is more about of course it's more about controlling the land and not allowing anybody else to, because if the black vote is as strong as the black people, then it will dominate, in my opinion. But I think in my understanding of everything from the start of this corporate entity known as the United States of America, which is on the land of America. I like to sometimes point that out because there's a difference between the United States and the actual land of America. But if the people that originated here, the natives, the actual natives
Right, the
of
First
America,
Nation. Yep, the
yeah,
First Nation. Yep.
if they by chance discover that more black people are not African Americans and are indigenous to this land, they will lose the right to the land. And then people will begin to band together in a different way. So I believe that you got to stop that at all costs, because if you give them that power, they will lose the power.
well,
Yeah.
the thing that Bill, like you said, you kind of brought up a point there because as I was pointing, like first 1965 Voting Act, then Bush Voting Act, now all of a sudden, well, maybe if you have to stand in line, you shouldn't vote. Maybe you know, I mean, I don't understand, and I know this is something that I keep harping on, because all of us being veterans, we especially know the importance of water
Hmm.
and keeping your body hydrated. Not, I mean, mentally also, I mean, uh, you guys probably learned a whole lot different from me because, I spent probably most of my tour shoveling salt tablets down my damn throat. You know, uh, that's so
Yep.
much that your fatigues when you sweat would be coated. I
Hard.
mean,
Right.
you know,
Hard.
yeah,
Yeah. Seize up on you. Yes. Get hard. Yes.
so
All too aware.
so you know. I mean, I know it's not that extreme, but when you hear of somebody, if they're taking the time to stand in line, because it's very seldom, like I said, in the places where I voted, it's very seldom where I've had to stand in a line. Usually, I can go in there. There might be one or two voting machines, somebody coming out, I go right in. But I've never had to stand in line in order to vote. So I don't know about that experience, but I know about the experience of standing in line in the military. you know, And I know with the sun, people that's not used to it, the sun beating down, blah, blah. I can go into all kinds of different things. But humanitarian, just being human. Dr. Casey, I mean, how does someone, it's, and your state perplexes me because I want to, I want to, I want to really raise water to for Georgia, but I thought about a couple of things. One is if someone comes down from another state, they're automatically going to be branded as an outside agitator. So I thought of the other way around, where if we send the water to Georgia and have various groups distribute the water actually in that are there, then it's just a donation and so forth and so on. But then you tell me that this law is so strict that you can't even pass out water to people that are standing in line.
Right.
The craziest part is that they're more likely to try to enforce it because of what the goal that they're trying to reach. Some things you put in a law and then, if they catch you, then that's one thing. But this is one of those things that I think that they'll truly be patrolling to try to make sure that this is not a problem.
See, that was the part that really, I guess, scared me because I would think that this would be, like, hey, are you going to go about each polling place to see if someone's passing out water? I mean, and as I said, I mean,
It's
this,
normally somebody at these places. Like, anyways, it's normally like some type of security or somebody that's there anyways. So I'm not sure if that person is going to be used or what is going to happen.
but there, I mean,
Can you mute Bill's microphone? I
yeah.
think that's the feedback.
Let me see. Is that it? Okay? Um, yeah, it was. So my understanding. Now, you couldn't have any. I understood you couldn't have any political signs or captions in it, and under that, I understood that part. But a bottle of water is a bottle of water, and as you say, I mean, if Georgia can pass something like this, we see the other states kind of getting in line. You look at Texas, you look at Arizona, you look at
The
Florida.
ones that will benefit from this and the results that they want a certain statistic. They want certain a certain narrative. So for those that the states that want that narrative or want to try to exercise that as that will be a, what will keep people from coming to the polls, they're going to use whatever tactic they can use. I mean, it's, tactical warfare, just in a different sense.
Okay, now I'm going to, in pointing to these states are also a part of, and wait for it, the Bible Belt.
Are you surprised? The
love
Bible
that,
Belt.
love thy neighbors. How does that go? uh, you know,
They more spirit of ride, spoil the child.
uh, that, that's my generation. You know, that's my
That's where the
generation.
Bible Belt. They beat you with that Bible.
Yeah, but so so once again, you know, it just seems like it's uh, Bill. I don't know whether you got in on all that conversation, but
I did.
okay.
So, and of course, I mean, I'm from a state that's, we used to joke it's the buckle of the Bible Belt. So both Jerry Falwell and Pat right? So and Pat Robertson started universities there, right? So Liberty University was started in Lynchburg, Virginia by Jerry Falwell, and his son, I think, still sort of runs it well, not by himself, but is on the board of trustees. And Pat Robertson, who is I think still alive. But he
Which one is it, Bill? That I have sinned, and do you remember
no,
that?
that's Jimmy Swaggart. That's
That's
who
Jimmy Swaggart. Okay.
he's. So fun fact, he's first cousins with Jerry Lee Lewis, and they were in a band together when they were teenagers. But that's a different breed. Those guys are down there in the bayou. No, but the thing about Virginia is they have a sort of the term you always hear is genteel. Yes, it's racist, but it's genteel racism, right? Instead of having all that ugliness like they had in Mississippi or Arkansas when people tried to integrate the schools, we'll just shut down our public schools. No muss, no fuss, right? Massive resistance. Colgate Darden just shut schools down. That way, no one's getting whipped over the head or whatever, spit at and all that stuff. We just want to have public schools. The fact is that when you look at the quote unquote Bible Belt, right? These are also former slave states, obviously, right? That these two things kind of go hand in hand. In that you have these states below the Mason-Dixon line, where it's praise the Lord and pass the ammunition. So you have a society that is still largely built on a lot of the same ideas and ideals that built the Confederacy. So, I mean, when I was I've never been stationed a place where I didn't see the stars and bars. Right now, I think now it's now against Army regs, I believe, to play those stars. But when I was in, it was fairly darn common to see the stars and bars.
And a few swastikas and whatnot. I mean,
well, I remember when I was at
I'm back even further than you, so I mean,
yeah, I was at Fort Bragg. First time I got to Fort Bragg was in summer of '88, and yeah, they not only did they find like a fairly decent number of neo-Nazis, there was a group of dudes who were so bold that they used their APOs to send out materials. I'm not joking. It's not.
I know. Hey, I used to drive cabs on Fort Bragg. Okay. So I remember when the one guy from the 82nd Airborne decided he wanted to go hunting one night and shot a black couple walking down the road.
I remember that exact same incident. So this is so it's funny because we're talking about the same time period. That was around the time,
right?
I was there. I mean, I remember this. I was there at the time. So I remember noticing guys would relace, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? Would relace their boots. You know what I'm talking about? And I was like, that's against, I mean, obviously against a bunch of things, but like uniform regulations. Like, how is this not? No one's going to say anything. Like, I remember this. That's where I come from. We aren't allowed to just personalize our uniforms. Like, what the hell is going on? And it's because they had support, going fairly high. I mean, if you know nothing else about the army, is that if you decide to do something and you're not getting hammered for it, it means somebody well above you decided it's okay. So I remember trying to, report people. And people like, sure, okay, thanks. We'll take that. The classic, we'll take it under advisement. Right? Remember that? Remember that? We'll take it under advisement. Um, yeah, it was crazy, the stuff I found there. I saw, not quite as intense, but I saw some similar stuff when I was at Air Assault School at Fort Campbell. Um, Fort Lewis was okay for the most part, but Benning, Bragg, and Campbell all had a definite, defined, and fairly sizable either Klan associated or neo-Nazi associated groups that would operate seemingly with impunity because I mean, I would make reports sometimes and it'd be like, oh, yes, so thank you so much for your information. I mean, I saw things and some of it was just crazy to me. I mean, some of these dudes would be literally fundraising. I'm not even joking. Would be literally fundraising on base for, the Church of Christ Identity. Look those suckers up. Yeah, I mean, there were guys that had copies of the Turner Diaries in with their personal. I'm not, once again, not a joke. Not joking. So when the Timothy McVeigh thing went down, I was like, see? I was like, I've been reporting, I mean, maybe not literally him, but basically him at 3 different bases, and no one cared a farthing, right? And then it's like, how could this happen? Oh, I was so frustrated when that happened. And all those people died unnecessarily.
It's so interesting to hear veteran stories like from different perspectives, y'all generations, and then from a male perspective versus the female perspective of being a veteran because it's a different experience, a little bit. So I find it very interesting to just listen to your stories.
Well,
Now, where did you spend most of your time when you were in, Dr. Casey?
What my first duty station was in Korea, South Korea, and then I went to Kansas, Fort Riley, Big
Fort
Red Run.
Riley. Okay.
Yeah, and I definitely saw a lot of stars and bars there. But I've always been on my own per se, so I would never go outside of the parameters of what I felt was safe. So if I felt like it was a lot of uh black roads or places that look like if I get caught back here by myself, I might not make it back home. I avoid those. Even now, here driving home, I live like outside of the city and and I don't even like driving on coming home from in the city because the streets are black. And I'm just thinking, like, look, I still live in Georgia. This is still the South. And literally, I went to go take my car to a guy that I see custom old school cars. And I went back to where the garage is that he work at, and it was some stars and bars. And I was like, oh, okay. And what was the price? All right, then let me go ahead and get up out of here. And like, so I have always been very aware of my surroundings in that sense.
now, when I was younger, I was probably somewhat of an agitator.
Shocking.
Because you know uh, I might ask you, if like, where's the rally, or something, like, where can I find one of those? I've never seen. What does it? You know, something that I know that's gonna
Provoke.
bring a certain reaction. You know,
Yep.
but remember, I got 4 numbers now, so if I slap you, I got to eat you. So, but it always interested me, like how can you be that brazen? And if you're that brazen, how can I? I mean, to me, it's like a slap in the face,
But
literally.
that's years and years and years of built up audacity. That is years of built up audacity. That
Or,
I mean,
or as the kids like to say nowadays, the caucasity.
right. But when you think about the fact that all racist groups, hate groups are built on the Bible. I mean, like I literally because I had a neighbor, I lived 30 minutes outside of where Trayvon Martin got killed at the time Trayvon Martin got killed in Florida, St. Cloud, and my neighbor had a swastika or whatever the hell that is on his arm. And after I seen it, I was like, whoa, now I think it's time for us to move. But then before that, though, I also was like, you know what? Let me look up and understand these people because I don't really get it. I don't understand. And when I really looked up, one, they all got Jesus signs all everywhere. That and that is baffling to me because how can y'all both believe in the same Jesus and have two different perspectives about the same God? But when I started reading it and understanding it, they literally use the Bible. Like, look, we stand on this scripture and this scripture and this scripture, and this gives us permission to say, and it's from the way it reads, it's not about hating us as much as it is about possession of the land, feeling like, if you know the history of how the Europeans actually got here, they was running away from being enslaved themselves. So once they got away, they was like, you know what, we ain't never going back to that again. And now it is a matter of them trying not to go back. So instead of them allowing somebody else to be placed on top, which is the reason why they hinder the voting rights, they just stifle that because as long as that is stifled, as long as people are religious and people are turning away from religion more and more now, probably than ever before in history because the information is available. So when you turn away from that, when you move away from all of the religion and all of that, um you can kind of begin to see, the truth of it all. But as long as you are worshiping the same Jesus that all the white hate group that don't want you to be here worship the same Jesus, I just don't see where it's beneficial or where it's a real good thing because literally they gave you it, the religion. They told you this is what you can do. This is what we're allowing you to do. To the
Right.
point to where now it's like, oh, we get to do this because they told you to do it after they shaped it and made it be what they needed it to be for them. And
But
then they
the thing,
they don't even want you in the same church with them. You know what I'm saying?
well,
Like
well,
it's
no, you have to remember, even when church first started, it was okay for you to go to church, but you still had to sit in the back.
right.
But you mentioned the Jesus
And then they
thing.
let the good old boys, the good niggas, they let them teach because they gonna keep them in line and they gonna rub their ego and they gonna tell them exactly God is gonna save you. I'm still waiting. Everybody here is still waiting there for the same savior that they was waiting for 100 years ago, 50 years ago. The same person that Dr. King was saying was gonna deliver in the dream. We still waiting on the same religion to free us
And
with
Bill,
no nothing. It's nothing has materialized as of yet, and I don't understand why people are still so gun ho about it.
Bill, she mentioned a lot of things there. Because I make it a habit. Like I said, I kind of agitate and poke the bear and all that. But I make it a habit to go on these different Klan sites and white supremacist sites and stuff like that. And as you said, the first thing I see is a cross, you know,
Mhm.
uh, in some form or
Heavy
another.
religious.
And then, there's a word that Dr. Casey always uses, and I was waiting for her to bring it out of her bag this time. and that's Christ. And the difference between
Because religion and Christ is two different
no,
things.
but that's another thing that's also pushed on their websites.
Mhm, mhm,
That's
mhm. See, but the crazy part is they understand Christ outside of Jesus. They get that part outside of Jesus, and the black community is like it has to be Jesus Christ, and not understanding that Jesus was a person that held the anointing, the Spirit of God, more angelically on earth than other people. It wasn't what people like. He was like this floating light beam. No, he just possessed more ability to love, possessed more ability to forgive, which
Yep.
has a natural healing power. Like, and it to me, it's like the black magic that they tell you is wrong, but it's really right if you really, look into it. But it's black because everything dark light, black magic, everything that's black, dark, brown is made to be evil.
Right.
right,
And
right.
the other thing that so like you, and I've stopped doing this because you know, all the IP addresses being logged that you visit. But back in the old days, I used to check out like what's going on Stormfront. Hey, what's front up to, right? Um, and then so you mentioned, Christ, and you mentioned, how much mention of, but then if you take a step further, because there's different levels to it, some of them go straight to Yahweh. And if you keep digging, you get to the guys who are into Wotan, right? That's when you reach the top level, the Wotan guys, right? Those guys said, we're skipping all that. We're going straight Norse, right? Those guys are the ones that have decided, forget all this foolishness, because, some of them do realize that, Ishiwa or Yoshua spent all his time with Jews. Like at some point, you have to confront that, right? So some of them said, forget all that business. We're going straight Wotan, right? Those guys are also fun to check out. And they're the ones, when you get like the Wotan level people, they're the ones that are constantly trying to get people pregnant, right? Because they feel like there's not enough white babies being born. I love those guys because they've got all these wild, I mean, all of them have wild theories, obviously, but like their understanding of how the world works is fascinating. And their whole thing is, in fact, there's lots of books by people who would not claim to be with them, but they read obviously the whole birth bomb. Remember the birth bomb book? Anybody remember this book, The Birth Bomb? And this was by this guy who's supposed to be an actual like researcher and scientist, but it was basically it's all that fear that white people have of other people populating the earth other than them, right? And they have this deep.
Which is actually come to fruition because what in the next 5 years they will be a minority.
Well, I mean,
I
they're
honestly,
already. They've always been a minority on the
I
planet.
think, I think they just play that pseudo mind game to make you think that it's more white people than any other people. That is not
Right.
true. It's no way possible for that to be
It's
true.
it's
No, no,
like the
no.
iPhone thing. Most people have talked themselves into thinking that everyone has an iPhone, the same way that white people have tried to talk everyone into thinking everyone's white. And it's based around the same thing: manipulation and public relations, right? If you understand, psychological warfare, manipulation, public relations, you can convince someone that up is down and all kinds of stuff, right? The Manchurian Candidate, was not just fun entertainment, right? I mean, there's a lot more go. I love watching the Manchurian Candidate and rewatching the Manchurian Candidate.
Have you seen the new one? There's a new
Yeah,
one
yeah,
out.
yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
mean, and no offense to the new one, but give me the one with Angela Lansbury in it. That's to me, that's still the real Manchurian Candidate. Um, and especially when you consider when they made it, right? I mean, McCarthyism is that far in the. I mean, it's just barely in the rearview mirror when they made that film. It wasn't like decades after the House of Un-American Activities Committee finally closed up shop. It's a handful of years after the House of Un-American Activities Committee's closed up shop. They're still, I mean, Roy Cohn is still in his prime, right? I mean, these guys haven't gone anywhere when they make this film. I still think it's one of the most impressive and interesting uses of American filmmaking to talk about something that people usually don't try to talk about. But back to the original question. So when you have to carry out the minoritization of other people in order to protect yourself both physically and psychologically, because that's why it happens. That's why the term minority and the minoritization of anybody who's not white was done, right? I mean, here's a great example, right? The island of Hawaii. Hawaii is a united state, right? It's one of the states, but I mean, there's so much. I mean, all we contributed to, the violent overthrow of the actual, ruling family of Hawaii. I mean, that's all, but we now have it so that Native Hawaiians, people who, whose, blood and genetics or whatever stretch back thousands of years, are, I mean, it's not quite like, being put on reservations, but it's sort of like gentrification with here's a place for you, and we'll still let you work in all the nice hotels and restaurants, but you sure as hell can't live close to them, right? You can live over there, and you can take this bus back over here where all the, tourists, not all of them white, but, there's Asian tourists and white tourists, whatever, but the native people of Hawaii have been so marginalized, so hard. I mean, it's incredibly under-discussed, is what I would say. Alaska has done a much better job, right? I never thought I'd end up on this show praising Alaska for any reason, but Alaska's done a much better job of both acknowledging and even sometimes empowering the Inuits and Aleuts and other native people of Alaska, right? Giving them access to resources, recognizing their contributions, cultural and otherwise, as opposed to trying to shove them off the prime properties. Now, there have been some battles over things, including the pipeline and other stuff, but it's way better than Hawaii. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. Where, like I said, the native people of Hawaii are, I mean, you should see where they live. Now, Hawaii, I mean, we talk about like places where it's hard, where the cost of living is high, but no state, not California, not New York, no state is close to Hawaii. Now, some of it's because everything's more expensive because things have to be shipped there. That's part of it. But it's not all of it. It's not all of it. And so when you see, we always talk about, how wages have not kept up, and you see what the people who clean your pool and whatever it is, all the stuff that the native people of Hawaii almost exclusively do. I mean, like almost all of the sort of menial labor or whatever you call it is done by the natives, right? The native people of Hawaii do that stuff, right? And the people who have all the top, best, whatever, are usually one generation or less, right? People who came there from California or from wherever, a generation at most ago have, and of course, the Japanese have a huge presence there too. I don't want to make it sound like it's all us, but the Japanese have an enormous presence and own a huge amount of Hawaii. So they didn't win it in World War II. They decided later to just use, who needs bombs, right? When you can just do this. So the minoritization, that's where I started with this. The minoritization process is threefold, right? Part of it is the psychological thing where you convince everyone, oh, well, you guys are only X% of the total plurality, right? So that's part of it. And then a part of it is material based, right? Making sure that, I mean, we could do a whole show on redlining, but there's a bunch of ways, 1,000 different ways you make sure that certain resources do not trickle down. Remember trickle down economics? Where eventually they trickle down some economics on you, right? So there's a variety of ways. So that's the first two, right? One of them is psychological, one of them is material. And the last part of the minoritization process is erasure, right? Where they either sometimes almost literally erase your contributions in history, right? Which is happening right now as we speak about what's going on in our schools. So that's part of the minoritization process.
That's been going on since way before this. Like everything that
Oh,
we've
yeah.
gotten thus far is a watered down.
Mhm.
Let me fix. Look, it's like a dry erase board. I'm gonna erase this part, and it. Oh, but let me write something right there just to make fill in that gap. It's like gap fillers.
Right. But when things started to get, things started to warm up underneath certain, pilgrims, what they've done now is said, forget that watered down whitewash stuff. It's just gone. Xing it out. We're just gonna, hey, no muss, no fuss. We're just gonna.
They don't want their grandkids to know how bad they really were. But the
Sure.
power of belief when it comes to that psychological part is really strong. Like the more if you get enough people to believe, then that energy like fills the whole world.
Well, and
See,
part of what
but
triggered this, right, was when people started toppling those statues, and they were like, no. Right?
but
All the pearl clutching and hand wringing. Well, if we don't have this statue of Nathan Bedford Forrest, think of the children. Um, First of all, we teach history so utterly terribly that I would bet you $1 to a donut that less than 10% of America's high school seniors can tell you who Nathan Bedford Forrest even is. But all of a sudden, when they started knocking down the statue, people just lost their ever loving minds.
but
The
but Bill,
of yes.
how many young black people, or maybe Dr. Casey, but how many people know who Stokely Carmichael is?
AKA Kwame Ture. You're right. We
Yeah, so it's not
or
just.
heck, Bayard Rustin. We talked earlier about the whole Iowa Dream and March on Washington. There is no March on Washington without Bayard Rustin.
Right. So I
He
mean,
was both black and gay. They were like, no. We can't
I,
have you being a part of this, or at least not. We can't have people knowing that you're a part of it.
I mean, everybody knows about the Red Cross and Claire Barton, but how many people know about Dr. Drew? How many people know that
Right.
that stop sign? I mean, that stoplight that you pull up to.
Yep.
I mean, oh yeah, who's that made by? Oh, Thomas Edison, or I mean, some other some other ridiculous ass answer.
Right. I
So
mean, and
so
the real
history.
McCoy, right? People use the term the real McCoy without even knowing
And
why they're saying it. It refers to Elijah McCoy, right? And
no,
one,
it refers to the real McCoys back when they came. Do you remember when they first came on TV? The Beverly Hillbillies and all. I mean, come on, he was shooting at a coon and found oil. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah. That always rubbed me wrong. That whole shooting at some coon. You're like, wait a second now. Hold on. Why all the hostility, Jeb?
You know what? I
But
love that show, and it never until you just said it right now. I just never even paid that any
never hit you
attention.
till now,
It
huh?
never, I never even. It was just like water off a
Yeah,
duck.
yeah. A very
And the
special
crazy part
episode
is,
of Mayberry RFD. Yeah.
there are a lot of things that have been strategic. No, I won't even say. I don't even think some of it was strategically done. I think that it was done out of pure ignorance sometimes. And at the time, because it's almost like when you think about what is considered sexual assault now versus what has been considered sexual assault the whole history before now, like every before 2020 or 2015, the things that were okay once are like you can't
Doctor
even
Doctor
rub
Doctor
a lady on
Casey,
her shoulder.
Dr. Casey, the things that I said to your grandmother would probably get me put in jail right now.
I mean, under the jail right now, it would be, you know what I'm saying? Like, and,
Probably you
but it's
probably
the
right because I've already been in, so you probably right.
but it's the same thing, like the things that were okay then when you think about the blackface, when you think about the way that Step and Fetch It was created, the all of the degrading things that now we're like, wait a minute, this shouldn't be, and they're like, oh yeah, we can't do that, but it used to be like that was y'all's thing, like y'all was trying to ride that wave, and now the world is changing, and I always feel like things have to get a little bit worse before it gets better, because you got to expose the things that need to be changed.
Sure,
You got to expose the bad in order to figure out how to make it better.
sure,
um that's
But
part of the reason why I like Trump's role in becoming president, because it exposed a lot of shit that people was like, "Oh no, this don't exist no more. People don't do that. That's not how it is." And it was like, "Okay, well, we about to see if that's how people really are." And I believe in some weird pseudo way, literally was like, "Here, y'all come on out. Let's I'm gonna expose y'all." Because I mean, I just always think about how
see,
much he
Dr. Casey,
manipulated the black community. I don't, but it wasn't manipulation. He was like one of us. Like, white trash people are like black people to white people, to like to rich white people, and white poor white people or white trash type people don't get that part, because it's like, y'all, they treat y'all the same until it's down to the nitty gritty, and then they be like, okay, but they white.
go ahead, Bill.
Well, it's funny you say that. So I am by nature a researcher. And how many of you guys are familiar with the writings of Alexander Stevens?
No, I'm not. I can't say that I am.
So Alexander Stevens was the vice presidency of the Confederacy. Jefferson Davis was a fairly young and handsome, and uh, he was the face. He was the pretty face, but he wasn't an intellectual heavyweight, to be perfectly honest. Jefferson Davis wasn't a deep thinker. Alexander Stevens was. Alexander Stevens was sort of the intellectual engine behind a lot of what happened during the Confederacy. And I've read a fair amount of his papers and writings and things like that. And amongst the things that were very, 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 very interesting was that Alexander Stevens later was one of the co-founders of something called the Knights of the Golden Circle.
Okay. I know who that is.
Okay, there we go. So that's what I meant. And one of the things that they wanted to do, in addition to starting to settle parts of Central America all the way down to Honduras and Panama, and bring it under sort of the slavery umbrella, and they had intelligence operations running all the way as far north as Canada. They had all kinds of stuff going on, and people are still finding buried money that the Knights of the Golden Circle left. And it's the Knights of the Golden Circle that are responsible for turning a little, not little, but a murderer and bank robber, Jesse James, into a quote unquote hero. That's all because of the Knights of the Golden Circle. Jesse's older brother Frank had ridden with what's called Quantrill's Raiders, who were not they were not officially a part of the Confederacy because they were not regular army. They were never in the Confederate Army. They were paramilitaries. What if they were in Central America? We call them a death squad. That's what Quantrill's Raiders were. And so Jesse James, though he never was a member of the Quantrill's Raiders himself, sort of grew up idolizing, looking up to his brother, and by extension, Quantrill's Raiders. But here's why I brought up Alexander Stevens. And one of the things they also wanted to do was eventually take the buckra, right, the white trash, whatever term, and basically put them into permanent serfdom, right? So eventually they wanted almost like a monarchy or oligarchy or whatever, where there would be rich whites, right, who would run everything. And then the buffer between the slaves and them would be the buckra, the white trash. Now, this somewhat naturally happened anyway, but they didn't want to just leave it to nature. They wanted to codify it in law so that non-landowning whites would become essentially second-class citizens. And
The
so,
middle class.
well, they wouldn't even be middle class, quite
I
frankly.
mean, but the term fits between the top.
Oh, I mean, structurally
The
they'd be in the
yeah,
middle,
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
right,
yeah.
right. But they would not be living like what we think of as middle class. They would be living like those people in Russia lived, right? Those kind of serfs.
Well,
That's what
that's,
they
but
had.
it seems more of like the rebranding that I talk of, how they just change what it means on the face
Right,
of it, but it's still the
right,
same structure.
right, right. Because now, when you mention the middle class, what you're really talking about is the working poor. but that's a different conversation also. Go ahead, Bill.
So, if indeed, and I mean, there's some one of the, in fact, I'm doing a writing where it's sort of an alternate history where the Confederacy ends up forcing a negotiated peace as opposed to being defeated by the North. And it's called The Other Two Fifths. And it talks about the gradual process of manumission as opposed to what happened all at once with the Civil War ending. So instead, there's 100+ years of slowly freeing people, and they have to go through a deslavification process, which is where the other two fifths in the title comes from. But
But
that
aren't we in that phase now? The deep slate. Okay.
well, at one point we were, James, but I think what you should realize is that somebody's trying to turn that sucker 180, right? Hey, let's not free them. I mean, I think that's what you should take away from what's happening.
Essentially.
Yeah,
You see,
they're trying to slowly
like I
free.
said, the pessimist in me looks at this glass as not half full, but 3/4 empty.
Oh, I thought you could say they knocked it over, but whichever.
You know,
The it certainly is.
no, I mean, there's a voice, but it's like the guy that plays the glass, and he gets one tone when it's full, he gets
Yep.
another tone after it goes down a little, when it goes down, until he gets to that desired tone. Well, right now, you know, they decided, or we actually, I think we have accepted that the glass is 3/4 full, but rather than have marches and have leaders like we had back in my day, um, I don't see that type of leadership coming. And
It's not coming, and it's because of
and
what happened to the leaders from your day, right?
well, but see, but the thing, hey, we're all gonna die eventually anyway. So I'm, my,
It's really a matter of making more strategic moves. Like, it takes so much strategy to try to get ahead in this world. When we're facing societal, systematic disparities, like it is structured for us
Yes.
to never get a head up or a foot in. And the moment that we take, just it's like Black Wall Street all over again. It's like any place that got a really good going and then they destroy it, because if you allow black people to be what they naturally are, to do what they naturally do, what we see our influence in every single thing across the whole world, then we will not be the subsection or the subpart or
Right.
the B side to everything. We literally dominate everything. They don't want us to know we dominate everything. It's a whole lot of mind games to
but
keep us from thinking that we
but
control
but but
more than what we realize.
but hold on, Doc. How can you say that when it? I don't care. You can talk about Facebook and social media all
It's
you want,
beyond that. If we
but
stop,
no,
the
no,
whole
what
system stops.
right?
If we stop giving ideals, if we stop having doing sports, if we stop, if one, if we collectively
Entertainment.
across, I'm not talking about this bullshit that they do when they say they're gonna stop the black dollar for a day or two. If we literally stop being productive people mentally, like if we just shut down mentally and we just like lay low for just 6 months, even the whole world would stop. Beyonce song where she say "world stop," it would literally pause, because nothing goes on without the depths of our souls. They
Yep.
use our spiritual entity, they
Yep.
use everything about us to profit. We don't see it because we think that Jesus didn't, whatever Jesus is supposed to have did to save us, that ain't came through yet. But we sleep on ourselves. We put our own spiritual beings to bed, and then say, you know what, all of that is. I just had this conversation with a cousin yesterday or the day before yesterday because she's like, I have these dreams, I get paralysis, and it's all demonic. It's all, and I'm like, they used to kill witches back then. They wasn't killing witches because they was really demonic. They was killing them because they was spiritually beyond control of the system and the structure. And she's
Right.
like,
Also,
nah,
also, it was part of a hostile takeover of the healing practices
industry,
and
yes,
sciences by
because
men.
that's what allowed for the pharmaceutical industry to be what it is. Chemistry is witchcraft. Everything that we see is everything that they've told us is evil, so that we won't come to the knowledge of, wait a minute, well, this is what they was doing to, this is what our ancestors did that they said was evil. All of the
So
things
wait a
that
minute. So Dr. Casey, are you telling me that H2O is crow's feet and bat wings?
look, they'll convince you of it if they could. I'm telling you, let me tell you. It's a lot of things that I'm literally, I'm telling you, I had this conversation with my cousin and she was like, all of that's demonic. And I'm like, one, the sleep paralysis might not even be what you think it is as sleep paralysis, but it's a lot of spiritual things that science can't account for, that they'll tell you that you're crazy. That, I mean, even some of these mental disorders are not necessarily as what is depicted to be in mental health. A lot of these things are a spiritual, it's like we live in a spiritual world that is very physical to us. But when you talk about the spirituality part of it, then you talk about every soul has a different purpose, every person has a different purpose. So somebody might really see spiritual beings and entities right while we sitting here. But
Sure.
if the wrong person hears that you see spiritual beings, one, they're gonna think you a witch, they're gonna tell you evil, and they're gonna put you on some medicine to control your spiritual awareness of what's really going on this planet. There are people that literally see that type of realm of like their spiritual realm is
Yep.
on a different frequency where they are able to see spiritual beings. But if you go to your doctor right now and tell them that you are seeing something, they're gonna put you on some medicine. They're gonna tell you you're crazy. And I'm not saying that you might not have an overwhelming sense of sometimes the things that we think are demons, and this is just me speaking right now, is the people that got killed for no reason. that they don't understand what happened, and now all they wanted to do is get some peace, and now they trying to find peace, and they not meaning to harm you. But if you can actually see these people, the spirits and the souls here, like if you can see them, then it's going to feel a little bit one like torment, because everybody gonna tell you that you're crazy. So that's already gonna play on your mental. And then the actual process of you seeing somebody that's not supposed to be there, that it's a lot. It's more than people will, because people gonna be like, oh damn, she crazy. No. If you really understood the spiritual nature of the world that we live in, and then the soul aspect of it that are they are manipulating with Christianity, and not just Christianity, it's not just one religion, it's all of the religions that collectively have us divided so much to where we don't even realize what's really going on the planet in this world.
It's funny. Well, it's not funny that but it's interesting that you mentioned that because part of my PTSD is that I see souls,
And I
uh,
believe you.
and souls that I know that aren't, that have passed, you know, because of myself, and it's when a lot of people fall in those dreams, they wake up. Well, I'm the guy that hits the ground, so and it's a whole different, like you said, when I go, I used to go and tell the colonel that I used to see, as part of my PTSD treatment. The first thing that she wanted to do was put me on some type of medication, and that's not what I need.
Now,
I got
just
the
imagine you being able to foster that to the point to where you have enough control over your understanding, your perception of it, and then you because I literally have dreams of people dying. I have dreams about people having babies. I literally had a dream in 2017 about my friend passing away. At the time, I didn't understand the dream. I texted his uncle and called him and was like, "Listen, this I had this bad dream. I got a really, really, really bad feeling. Like I just woke up and I could not shake it." Last year, he committed suicide. Every single detail of what I said was gonna happen almost to a T happened. And when I tell people that, they'll look at me like, "Oh, okay," but no, I am. And people don't understand it. And I believe that some of PTSD allows you to be able to access that level of awareness, because it's more of an awareness than it is anything else. But and they're not going to understand it, especially if, I don't want to say it like this, but especially white people, if they don't have that ability. A person that doesn't have the ability, period. But then when you consider the fact that we are literally charged by the sun, that we literally get all of our energy from the sun mostly, and water, the natural resources, it changes the parameter of your thinking, because now it's not I'm just a black person or I just got dark skin. Now it's I absorb the sun and the sun gives me vitamin D naturally. If somebody else without this same pigment go into that sun, they're gonna get skin cancer, they're gonna get burned and everything else. That makes a big, huge difference. It may seem small and minute on the surface, but it makes a difference.
you know, and that's another thing that was kind of interesting because when I was out in the street doing dirt, the last thing that I wanted to hear in the morning from my woman was I had a dream. I don't know. That's the last. I don't
Man,
think
that
she,
intuition is strong.
you know. So yeah, I can tell you a couple stories about that too, but this is a different show. But Bill,
Yeah.
go ahead. I see you over there, kind of
Well,
nodding your head.
so I
It's
I
a
too have had
it's a
well,
such a deep
I
subject.
too have had clairvoyant dreams, but for whatever reason, mine are always like trivial stuff. I remember the first one I had, I was probably, I don't know, 9, and I had this incredibly detailed, vivid dream about fixing a mailbox with my father. I mean, the tools we used and the direction we laid it down and all this stuff. And then my mother runs over our mailbox parking about maybe 13, 14 months later. And we're out there with the hacksaw, evening it out. And it's like, oh my God, like, why this? Why not line numbers? Why? So, and I've had some other clairvoyant dreams, but they're always like, really? Like, I've never had one where it was like, I mean, I'm very sorry about the loss of your friend, but it's never those momentous things. It's always, that's
Trust me, you don't want them. It is a very antagonizing type of thing, because it's like I have no control over it. And it's very much different than somebody that read cards or do anything else, because I literally just go to sleep and I wake up like, oh God, what does this dream mean? And my son has dreams too. It was a couple years ago, a few years ago, a little boy in Florida got pulled into the lake by an alligator. Like about
alligator. Yeah.
2 weeks before that, my son had a dream that his hand got bit by an alligator, and I was like, "Son, like pray about it. Ain't nothing gonna get you." And then when it happened, he was literally scared, terrified, and scared of
Right.
alligators for a while after that dream.
Sure. And it's good, actually, to be afraid of alligators. They're basically dinosaurs that have
Right,
survived everything
literally,
else that ever
literally.
happened that wiped out all the dinosaurs. Uh,
They're the only ones that survived.
yeah, I mean, and they're, soulless.
Yo, Bill, I was just thinking about buying one on the internet. Let me see, where's that address here? No.
I mean, you know, hey, if that's whatever floats your boat, if that blows your hair back or whatever, cool. But just understand that it will never truly bond with you. It'll
Yeah. It's
always
like
wonder.
having a snake for a pet, and I've had one
Well,
of those
well,
too.
the difference
Yeah.
is if you have a snake for a pet, unless you have an anaconda, you are probably not on the menu. But if you have an alligator, it's always a chance. But back to what we're discussing. I have had, not maybe to the extent of either of the two of you, but I've had experiences where I've heard names that I don't know, and then later I'll meet the person to whom that name belongs. Um, it's like, why do I know your name? Oh, that's right. I just heard it, while I was showering nowhere, right? Why? Who? What? And I went through a period of my life where I was doing, like changing my diet and changing lots of other stuff, and it opened me up, and I would get essentially visitations of the spirit, and people would, say, well, what's it like? And I'd say, well, imagine that you have a car, and you have a friend who doesn't have a car and they need to get somewhere, and you slide over to the passenger side, you let them drive. You can still see everything that's going on. You can even communicate with them like, hey, don't go that way. I know what's down there. And so you have this experience, and you get these memories that aren't your memories, right? And here's the crazy thing, James. One of the drivers, I guess, I had in my vehicle was in the 173rd and died, apparently. I mean, based on the memories that I sort of were left residually, about 2 days before my birthday in 1967. So that was an interesting experience. But yeah, I mean, this is not something I normally talk about. Well,
See, but you know what? And the thing is they don't teach about that in church. They don't
oh,
teach about spiritual,
no.
like the real spirituality, the real spiritual awareness. That is something that you will be told that you are demonic, that you're a
Right.
demon, and you're going to hell for it.
Oh,
see,
why
see,
Moses saw a
see.
burning bush and why it was a
Yeah,
bush
see, there's
burning, right? They don't get into
Bill,
all that. And what
Bill,
is that stuff Moses, why frankincense and myrrh, right? You probably
Right.
know why
Hmm.
frankincense and myrrh. They
I,
never talk about it.
I
About
burn them all the time.
but Bill, it's interesting that when you were talking about the frankincense and myrrh and the different things that are kind of associated with that. Once again, that goes back to Dr. Casey and the actual origins in witchcraft.
Well, I mean, witchcraft, I mean, it's a term that we use, but it's
It's not really witchcraft as much
right. I
as
mean,
people
it's
want
Right,
to
right.
believe. I
Well,
mean,
I
it's
mean,
just it, it's the
all
way
the
to.
oldest spiritual practices get called something bad, right?
Mhm.
Voodoo, all these
yeah.
terms are essentially just describing all of our oldest spiritual practices,
Mhm.
paganism, all these terms that have become, minoritized, to bring back
Mhm.
the term we used earlier in our discussion, and have been minoritized for one reason, the same reasons we talked about before, both material and psychological disadvantaging, right? If I can convince you that, you know, talking to your dead grandmother is a bad thing, right? Or if I can convince you that, giving someone who no longer has a spirit that no longer has a body, your body for a while is a bad thing, and it means you're mentally ill, or it means that there's a demon in you, or whatever it is, right? One is it keeps you from being a fully empowered individual, right? And then two, it makes you dependent upon us, right? For guidance and this, all this other cool stuff that you need to enter into the kingdom of heaven. So, right. So, right, all right, because otherwise you get locked out, right? You get evicted. You get all right. your key doesn't work anymore, right? All that stuff.
Listen, Mr. Bill Carroll, you is on one right now, okay?
uh, uh, Brother Williams, how are you doing this evening?
Uh, I'm good. I'm alive. I'm trying to exercise my lack of voting rights.
Well, wait a minute, y'all, because I just wanted to say this. I think we're missing. I should wait for somebody else that's supposed to be here when I say this, but I just heard and read an article that your natural immunity is a little bit stronger than your vaccines. Y'all ain't seen that article?
I've seen it.
I
Yeah,
yeah, I
I've
read
seen
something
it.
like that in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
like I
another one
say,
that just came out within the last 48 hours.
yeah.
Mm.
Well, I'm looking for a lot of things to come out, especially since we had the march on Washington yesterday by the non-vaccinated. So, but uh,
No,
uh,
those are my
uh,
people. Well, not all of them.
yeah, I was gonna say,
I know
yeah,
some of them wouldn't claim you, Doctor Casey.
Right. That's
no,
why. That's why I had to backtrack. I had to backtrack. That's the only time I'm gonna backtrack. Okay, that's the only time.
but Brother Williams, I'm glad you came in because I want to take this time to discuss one of my favorite lines from a movie. And this is from The Magnificent Seven. And I don't care whether you watch the Yul Brynner version or the Denzel version. But the villain says, because all the people are gathered in the church here, to protect themselves. He's got a Gatling gun and tons of riders out there. And the first thing when they asked him why, Denzel asked him why, and he said, if God hadn't wanted them to be sheared, he wouldn't have made
You
them
made
sheep.
them sheep, right?
And then the first thing I think of, like I said, being a preacher's son, when we go to church, we're called a flock, and
Mhm.
we have a shepherd.
Yep.
What the hell is wrong with this picture? Well, I mean, come on now, come on. I'm getting like my man, the old me. Come on, son. What the,
Mr. Carroll kind of broke into the reason for that when he just was talking about how if you really understood the power of the ancestral realm and the spiritual realm, and you really lent your body to be a vessel to the spirit realm, they wouldn't be able to control you first and foremost. So, the whole mindset and aspect of being sheep is so that they can lead you the way that they want you to go, so that you don't go off and start thinking on your own. You don't go out and start exercising your own spiritual power. So
Right.
you don't go
Lean
out.
not on your own understanding.
Right.
Hey,
You
yeah.
can't be
somebody
the
else got to understand it for you and explain it to you. Because if they
Yeah,
don't do it, then you ain't gonna get it.
yeah.
now.
You
Would
just
that
No,
be
I
can't
the
be that
mean,
difference
intelligent.
between? Would that be the difference between a black sheep and a white sheep?
And we talked about that. I said that all things that are black, dark, and they always make black magic, dark light, everything that
Hmm.
has to do with our skin complexion, or they try to relate it to that as being bad.
Well,
And literally, if they allowed us to really know our power, they
yeah,
would be out of power.
I would like to just kind of even go back to what I heard y'all, and I hate I wasn't able to jump in earlier, but I heard y'all talk about how they everything I would say pre-Christian in regards to our religious or spiritual practices. What I would say, our spiritual practice were considered to be evil and I would say they call them paganistic. Anything outside of Christianity, paganistic. But at the same time, they even made our earth practices even worse than that. You know, and so from that standpoint, when you look at the Bible in the way the words are used, in the way they are weaponized, because to me, I like to
Yep.
always go back to the concept of being weaponized. The way they're
Right.
weaponized to us as well as remember how we were initially taught through the slave Bible. So the whole point is when we were introduced to the Bible, it had a lot to do with pacifying us. And then even if you go through earlier media in terms of the movies, I was looking at something today in regards to what's his name, Van Peebles' father. I forget his name, but
Oh,
Van
Mel,
Melvin
Peebles'
Van
father.
Peebles,
Melvin,
the
Melvin
Yeah,
late
Van
great
Peebles.
Melvin Van Peebles. Yes.
yes, yes. So he was going over the aspect of cinnamon, talking about how the first roles that Africans had were playing, putting us in a position of showing us in docile or in fear, and you couple that with religious
Or Amos and
doctrines
Andy.
that create fear.
I remember Amos and Andy being one of the first shows where they introduced, where we were basically clowns.
Yeah.
Willie Sleep and Eat Best and Step and Fetch It and
Yeah, anything to
Mantan
diminish.
Moreland and Eddie Rochester Anderson.
Hmm.
We could go on.
Anything to diminish our thought process towards ourselves.
Correct. And again, it's just been weaponized. So to me, when you talk about the sheep and you talk about all these trigger words that get us to reflect on our lesser position, as well as obviously the way the imagery was played in terms of it never looking like us, and therefore we automatically are put in a position of inferiority. And so to me it's just the perpetualization of the psychology to continue to keep us from recognizing our greatness. And it even goes into what you see with the Arabs. It's the same thing. Let's not just simply beat up the Europeans in terms of Christianity, because the Arabs did the same thing with Islam. If you look at Africa now, is dominated by Islam, and is dominated in a position of also keeping us to look at ourselves as being inferior, especially as it applies to the ability to come up and address natural resources and land ownership. So it's just an all around fight against the darker skin.
That's why
And
I said earlier, Mr. Williams, that it's not necessarily about Christianity. It's
mhm,
all religions are used the same way systematically. Like,
yep,
and it's like the form of religion itself is to separate. So then the more you break it down, the more, and divide and conquer could be a good thing if you dividing to multiply, but when you dividing to remove and to take away and to basically instigate hate towards the other, then
right.
it really dismantles the whole reason that religion should have been even a thing.
But is religion in the black community geared toward pacification and not wanting to deal, like, uh, for instance, I'm sure, Brother Williams, you know out here, especially around Euclid Avenue and around there, we have food deserts. We have vast,
Mhm.
and I mean, Chicago. I'm sure you have the same in Atlanta. There's neighborhoods that I mean, I can probably go to Detroit and point out neighborhoods that were burned down in the '70s that still haven't been built back.
Well,
So,
I'll
and it seems like, well, hey, they're building up over there across town, Joe. So, like, it's okay that we don't have a school here, or we don't have a food market here. We'll just go on the other side of the freeway.
That's the beginning steps of gentrification, because in
right.
order for them to be able to buy it low, you got to push everybody out. So when you start taking
Yep.
out the stores, you start taking out the schools, you start breaking down the community in preparation for somebody to come in and buy it and take it and, change it.
Yep. And I would say look at how the term recently, I've noticed how the term tribalism continues to get utilized in politics. And they utilize it very negatively in terms of just referring back to it in terms of polarization, and kind of going back to what you were saying, Dr. Casey. It is basically the conquer and divide tactic all over again. But by drawing it toward the concept of tribalism, it actually even knocks more against us, because when you talk about the whole packet with black identity extremism, and us thinking about identity and think about how we connect together, we go back and says it takes a village to raise a people, which we talk about re-identifying with our tribal customs and our tribal ways of life, just as it applies to garnishing ourselves around some position of strength. But when it comes to weaponizing tribalism, the idea here is that, and going back to answer your question, King, the deal is as you break down and how these different denominations and black churches develop their own methodology of trying to strengthen their core beliefs, the underlying message in terms of what Jesus Christ represents to the black community, and as well as what the Bible interjects within that, is still the same. So no matter how you divide it up and try to spin off and create your own, the bottom line is there is a still a hierarchy of inferiority that is the bedrock of all of it in terms of how it is projected. And so just because we spin off and create our own brand, or we have our own way of doing it, doesn't negate the fact that the body that it reports back to is controlled by who?
It's crazy because um, literally it's just the programming.
Bill, we're getting some feedback from you. I'm not sure what that is, but what was your thoughts on that?
Up, you muted yourself. There you go.
Clear and obvious is that when we're talking about the white church, we're talking about the black church, the Catholic Church, which is still very influential, particularly in Latino and Latinx Hispanic communities. They have several things in common, and one of the main things they have in common is they've all been tools of the colonizer, right? So when you go to Canada and you read the news and they're talking about those resident schools where they're finding graves, sometimes mini graves of those young native children. And even beyond that, you talked about PTSD, the trauma, right? Sometimes due to just neglect, sometimes due to sexual assault, sometimes due to being torn away from family and being forcefully minoritized, right? Where your spiritual beliefs are ripped away from you, your mother tongue, right? Your own language is ripped away from you. So the church has been very often a partner in the minoritization process of peoples all over the planet, and has very often been, as I said, a tool by which people are subjugated. So has it also been a way of freeing people? The answer is yes, right? I mean, many of the organizers in Central and South America that led to some successful uprisings were also members of certain, what they call freedom theology. So I want to make it sound like it's always on the side of the oppressor and never on the side of the oppressed, because that would be inaccurate. However, there's been a lot of oppression that they have either been tacitly in approval of, or in some cases, very strongly, like in lockstep and in a partnership. And Brother War Williams made mention of the slave Bible, right? In addition to the slave Bible, and the Confederacy had a very short life, but my God, they do a lot in their little short life. Even beyond the slave Bible, you have to remember they created entire sciences, including phrenology and other things, sciences, that were intended, one, to try to justify the existence of race, which is not a scientific construct. Like anybody who's a geneticist or a biologist, whatever, will tell you, oh yeah, race is a myth, right? It exists because, as Brother War Williams talked about, the need to divide and conquer. When whites in Europe began to realize that they were outnumbered, right? The more they explored, so it's not at all a coincidence, obviously, that the age of exploration slides directly and almost seamlessly into colonization and exploitation. And it was necessary for them because, as we keep mentioning, the minoritization process feeds the minoritizer and starves the one who is minoritized. And so once they realize, oh my God, when we go this way, we run into these Asian people. When we go this way, we run into Africans. We go this way, we run into, savages, as they call them, right? So wherever they went, when they went this, they weren't finding more white people. Like, that's the thing they finally realized. Like, wherever we go, we keep running these people who are definitely not us. So when you are surrounded, how do you still manage to not just survive, but prevail, right? Conquer, lay waste to those that you find? Well, one, you have to disempower them. You have to convince them that you are here and they are here, right? So that's
Like
step
you gonna
one.
save them.
Right. Right. So that's step one, right? It's James. It's like calling in, calling in a gun run by a spooky or whatever, like softening everything up, right? So that's the first step, right? You lay down some 60 Mike, just to soften things up, right? That's what that first step is. And then yes, now you come into civilize them. Hey guys, here's the good news: you're gonna get civilized, and with that, don't answer yet. For the low price of your entire freedom and autonomy, you also get some Jesus. So you get that hand in hand, right?
And then when it wasn't given like that, it was forced. It was, I'm gonna beat you over the head, I'm gonna kill you, I'm gonna murder your family if you do not believe what we're telling you that we want you to believe, because this
Yep.
is the only way that you are allowed to believe.
Yep. Correct. And that's really
I'm sorry, I just had to put that in there.
but no, you're right. And that's the second phase when I talked about the minoritization process, right? And then last but not least, the dependence piece, right? You take away the resources and then say, oh, now I'll give you resources. The ones I just took away. Some of them back. You're welcome.
Brother
It
Williams,
made it seem like it was they were doing us a favor. I mean, and the worst part is the spirituality and all of the things that
Yep.
really give us our foundation as a people.
Yep.
Brother Williams, to kind of hook onto that, you weren't here during this conversation, but we were talking about these different sites, these literally white supremacist sites or whatever you want to call them. The first thing that you see on their page is a cross. Very first thing
Mm-hmm.
you see, in most cases, there's a scripture around the cross, over the cross, or whatever that justifies their being. And then you see that same white Jesus that you see when you come in your black church every Sunday.
Yep.
Yep.
I mean, so, you know, going back to Malcolm, uh, have we been bamboozled?
Yeah, well, and I'm sure Bill can elaborate on it even further. But keep in mind what the crucifix is. A crucifix is a symbol of power, as well as a symbol of it from a religious standpoint. It became a symbol of honor because Jesus Christ, quote unquote, lowered himself to be to the suffrage of human beings in terms of how it's displayed. But the crucifix prior to that was a way of exercising power and fear and domination upon the peoples of the land. And going back to what Bill was saying earlier, you're talking about that's forcible consent. The whole missionary process. That's forcible consent. And then the attitude and the process of what they did to create inferiority out of us and give us back some of our power. I refer to that as domestication. You strip somebody of their way of life, and then you feed it back to them slowly, as if you're doing them a favor. And before you know it, that people depend upon you totally on their way of life. And that's where we see ourselves. So we're so domesticated in how we're living in terms of our lifestyle. This is why we don't circulate dollars within the black community, because we don't have ownership. When you're a pet and you live through a mentality of a pet, then how do you have ownership from
Right.
a psychological standpoint? Naturally, you have to be liberated first in order to recognize that you have to regain power. And a lot of that's done through land, which goes back to what Dr. Casey was talking about the land grab. Every
Right.
time we attempt to fortify ourselves, they come in and they raise the tax bracket, they come in and they raise the price of the value, and they regain that land right back from us. So it's still, I always go back to saying we are at war, and as soon as we recognize we're at war, as soon as we recognize we're behind enemy lines, and we change our tactics, then we'll have a fighting chance. But as long as you refrain from the mentality of recognizing that, then it's all about it'll be greater later, which that's the pie in the sky concept.
Right,
Right.
right, yeah, and it goes back,
But
like I said, when I was 5 years old, and my father came in and told me that he was all of a sudden now he was Reverend King. I thought he had seen the burning bush. I mean, I'm where's this great revelation? And I think that's uh, the mentality of a church congregation, that of a child.
that is in the belief aspect of their dependency on the need for leadership. At this point, they feel like they need to be led. They don't even know how to lead themselves. They don't know how to accept the difficult parts of themselves to be able to lead themselves. And most of them will fight you tooth and nail to hold on to the belief that they can't even tell you the history of, or why they believe it, or where it came from. They can only tell you what their grandmama told them, and it's in the Bible, and that's it. And they don't have it. I don't know too many people that do as much research as me at my age. It's
Mm.
rare to be able to have a conversation with somebody the way that I can talk to y'all about different things, and the conversation go on and we can elaborate, because y'all know other things. But people my age and most religious people beyond my age, they will not open up anything that will take them away from what they've been told they are allowed to believe in order to get into heaven. They
Right.
believe that if they look into anything outside of their Bible, like Mr. Carroll said, they're going to get excommunicated from heaven, not from church. They think that God is going to say, you know what? Y'all reading too many things now. Y'all getting too educated for me to be God over y'all life. So y'all got to go.
Hey, let me bring y'all to get y'all to look into something called Project Megiddo, if y'all not familiar with that. And the reason why I bring that up, this was like an extended modern version of COINTELPRO that was going on in the I think mid to late 90s. The reason why I bring that up is because at one point in time, when Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad was the national chairman of the New Black Panther Party, that we found out about this program called Project Megiddo, and it was centered around uh, basically disbanding and keeping tabs and finding ways to neutralize quote unquote black messiahs. Khalid Abdul Muhammad, in terms of what he represented through the Nation of Islam, and now all of a sudden moving into a more of a militant role through the New Black Panther Party, was a prime target. And we actually found out about it in Dallas because it was by accident, but it had a lot to do with the fact that there was uh, police officers that were what that was told that didn't report, they wasn't able to report directly to their upline, but that they, because of the, I guess because of the relationship they had with the FBI and National Security Agency, they had a clearance that made them report to a different department altogether. And as this caught wind through some of the police department's upper echelon, it created a rift, and it was an exchange taking place to where some of the technology that the investigative federal agencies had were being actually given to the local police department so that they can continue to do the work of from a localized level that the FBI and the CIA was doing. And we found out about this, and this whole operation started to unravel. But I wanted to bring that up because Khalid Abdul Muhammad was one of the main targets of Project Megiddo, and it had a lot to do with the fact that he would utilize, again, if any of y'all are familiar with him, he would utilize the Bible and the Quran to justify basically open arm militancy and for us to resist and fight. It's kind of like he was heading in the direction and talked a lot of the same way what you had with I'm drawing a blank back in the day. uh y'all help me
Like the
out.
deacons were self-defense.
Not just the deacons of self-defense, but I'm talking about the one slave who turned the Bible around and,
Oh,
and
Nat
used it
Turner.
to just Nat Turner. That's why I don't know why I couldn't think of Nat Turner, but
Yes,
Nat
a
Turner.
Virginian.
So Khaled actually talked a lot like that. And so from that standpoint, they wanted to suppress that mentality. And to even couple this up into now, what do y'all think about the fact that NASA hired theologians to study how to persuade and how the religious community would respond to alien life? Because that even
Right.
folds right up into the same concept. They're
Man,
they're moving ahead and getting a step ahead of it so that they can automatically start disseminating throughout the religious community
you
a
see
way to deal with it.
you seen how people responded with COVID, how gas stations, like the way that people panic at the drop of the media saying anything is gonna go wrong is crazy. I mean, like, it's like pandemonium. Everybody is just all over the place, buying up everything, using all the gas. It's like Y2K. I think the Y2K wasn't even about the real things that it was made to seem about. It was more a line along the lines of the information that they've been trying to hide becoming available for people to be able to see and have access to. Because when the internet really bubbled, it changed everything, because now the information is at the palm of your hand. They can't just hide it from you no more. That's why critical race theory is a problem, because they cannot just hide the truth the way that they've hidden it for all this time. So everything is a play to not allow you to see, or not allow you to get enough exposure to something that will really truly make you aware. And it goes back to the spirituality and the understanding the real depths of your soul, because if you really knew, then you wouldn't be as easily manipulated as we are. Because I mean, literally, if your church tell you something, if all churches got on and said the same thing right now, you would see everybody doing whatever the heck all the churches just said do. And it's crazy that that is the sheep's mentality, because as soon as they say turn left, then it's like how you see the Korean army, or the Russian army, or any one of those armies overseas, where you see, and it be 1,000, 500,000 people, and they all, yeah, it's like that. That's how church is. That is the manipulative stronghold that church is. And it's so funny, because in the Bible it say there's a way that seems right. And I think that religion and church is the way that seems right, that leads you down to hell, or leads you to a torment. Because in my opinion, hell is not a place, it is a mental torment of your reality, your denial, your consciousness, really, honestly.
I always tell people that my in the afterlife, my aspiration is to be a boatman on the river Styx. and I can watch all these good Christians going to hell. But that's once again, yeah, there's a lot of animosity there. But
Listen, when it comes to like aliens and all of that, the aliens are not, I don't believe that it is a physical alien being always. I believe that those are also spiritual entities and in different realms and dimensions of this world that we don't know enough about. We only know the third dimension of what we see. We don't know all of the different aspects of living on this planet. We only know what we see and what we are allowed to believe. Everything else, they sugarcoat, hide. They don't tell us. They, control the information as much as possible.
you know, uh, my greatest fear, uh, when I look around, and when you talk about aliens and different life forms and things like that, my my greatest fear is that we are the most intelligent race in the universe.
Why is that your greatest fear?
It's- because uh, I mean, look at what we have accomplished on this planet. Other than we fucked up the air. I mean,
But
what?
that's not us though. Honestly, that is the control of those that are fed off of greed, off of the illusion of money. The illusion. It's a lot of things that are illusional that we believe hold a lot of weight, and that only hold weight because of our belief. And it's crazy, because when you say it, it sounds like, well, no, money is real. Yeah, I
Dude,
I could color this piece of paper and make it look like money and start calling it money. And if I give it out to enough people and get them to circulating it, then guess what? This is gonna be money.
well, what if the aliens have a hierarchy? I mean, it just seems to me,
We would be
you know,
probably
what what
the
what
their
what
best
what what,
friends.
what, what's the saying about absolute power corrupts absolutely?
There
Well,
there is no absolute power. But go ahead.
I just simply brought it up to let y'all know that the point is the idea is that they're making sure that they have an answer that's going to spread throughout the religious community to address it to keep people in their place.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. Definitely. But when you said it though, it goes back to what Mr. Carroll and I was talking about as far as not understanding your spiritual ability
Right.
and the soul ability to interact with other souls that may or may not be alive. All of those things are hand in hand because it's all outside of the realm of what they want us to understand and believe.
Right.
um, let's kind of wrap this up here, and as at least for this week, because I'm sure I'll find something else to talk about next week as far as the black church and religion goes. But uh, Dr. Casey, well, no, we're going to let you have the last word tonight. So I'm going to start with Bill. Why don't you give us your final thoughts? Then we'll go to Brother Williams, and Dr. Casey, you can take us home.
So I made mention that I've been I'm a reader. uh,
I'm a listener, Bill. I read. I
yeah,
go to audiobooks,
audiobooks are cool too.
I
But
love
at the
audio.
moment,
especially when.
I'm reading a book called "In the Lapse of the Gods," and it's a incredibly thorough analysis of the Red Summer of 1919. And I've read other books that dealt with it, touched upon it, um, including several really good books on lynching, including my favorite is a book called in the hands of sorry not in the hands by the hands of persons unknown is a great book on an analysis of the phenomenon of lynching and an attempt to try to figure out exactly how many lynchings have taken place, which no one will ever figure out, but they take a stab at it. But in the Lapse of the Gods, it lays out sort of the genesis of the Red Summer of 1919. And many of the circumstances of what laid out why the 1919 Red Summer happened, or happened at that level of intensity, because every summer was a red summer if you were a black person in America in those days, but 1919 was special, and not in a good way. So James asked the question, why now, X number of years after we dealt with this, why are we still dealing with this? And though to us 1919 was a long time ago, there were lots of pundits before the summer happens, obviously, who were talking about all the progress that had been made, right? By this time you have, W.B. Du Bois, right, has had a certain amount of national attention and success. Booker T. Washington also in his own way. This is obviously, about 15 years after what happened in, the Black Wall Street in Tulsa, but still there's all this talk of progress and things getting better. And, the 369th, Harlem Hellfighters have triumphantly marched right down Broadway and all that kind of stuff. And it's at least in part because of that the Red Summer takes place. Because there was a sense of Black America moving forward, right? There was this sense that Black America was getting somewhere, making progress, getting some stuff done, doing things, all that good stuff, right? And so it's at that point that with the Great Migration, right? Because this also comes as that first really large wave. Well, no, second really large wave, because the first one happens right after the Civil War. But the first really large, that second, even larger wave of migration out of the South, going both north and west, right, happened. And so now you had fairly large Black communities in places where you had just a handful of Black people, a mere 20 or even 10 years in some cases earlier. And so these points of friction between white and Black America that had always been there, right? Always heated up, right? Right? It's running faster and harder and faster than, right? Just like when you, as a Boy Scout or as a whatever, if you've ever been taught to build a fire using, flint, it's like that, right? Because all that friction ignites. And I have found several accounts of Black World War I veterans, some of them still in uniform, being, pulled off trains and pulled off whatever and lynched while still in uniform. All this is because that sense of Black personhood had risen up farther and faster than we think of, obviously, things being better now than before. But there was a lot, despite all of the incredible legal and material and financial and cultural stumbling blocks and obstacles have been placed in Black people's way between 1865 and, right before the summer we're talking about, 1919, there'd still been an amazing level of progress when you consider all of the things that were there to prevent it from happening. And then comes, like I said, the Red Summer. And for those of you that haven't done much research or reading on it, I just strongly, because it is the ultimate cautionary tale, because people say that kind of thing can't happen or it can't happen again. Well, of course it can. I mean, we got a little taste of how it could happen again on the 6th of January. Now, that wasn't directly, aimed at Black people, but it very easily could be. It would not take much, right? Those people needed a target. Now, that target wasn't us in particular that day, but it wouldn't take much. It would take very little, in fact, for that same sort of thing to take place, and instead it could be a Black church or a Black school or a Black business or a Black anything as opposed to a White House, right? It could very easily be turned once you have those people worked up and exercised and somehow convinced that something's being taken away from them And that is really what all of this that we've been talking about is about: a group convincing themselves that one person's or one group of people's success and uplift somehow diminishes them. And that's my final thought.
Uh, Brother Williams, Bill may not be aware of the five black hanging decorations that we had out here in California in the winter of 2020. But
Right.
go ahead, but go ahead with your final thoughts. Not only can it happen again, it can happen now.
Mm.
Yes, that's the point I made. Yes, that's what I'm driving at.
I just want to basically get our listening audience to do some research and continue to be vigilant on the information that we're presenting. And I want to also make sure people understand that we're not trying to create a wedge between the black church and the intellectuals and the
No.
students of history. What we want to do is just get our people to stop, you know, having you guard up to new information and recognize that, accept the fact that we have been misled. Just accept it and then move on from it. We're not saying live in the hurt. We're not saying, uh, uh, you know, have a defeatist mentality. What we're saying is just research and know the truth. As you know the truth, that will set you free. And one of the projects I would definitely recommend that people research is the Project Megiddo by the FBI, and that's spelled Megiddo, Megiddo, because this was like a precursor project to Black identity extremists, and it was literally certain members within the new Black Panther Party were targeted, as well as certain spirit, fiery religious leaderships were targeted. And one of the organizations that they list within the headline of it was the Black Hebrew Israelites, and it had more so to do with the fact that the idea was recognizing or patterning religion through a way of rising up against the status quo, rising up against being the oppressor, and taking it back, taking religion back from the oppressor. And in doing so, they created a project to try to snuff out and eradicate and neutralize the people that was engaging in utilizing religion to be a weapon for us versus a weapon against us. And so it's much out there if our people just do the proper research to be able to see the truth into what's going on. And there's a reason for that. So we have to be diligent. We have to, in 2022, we have to just say, hey, wake up, recognize the fact that um, the information highway is over flooded with a lot of drama, a lot of mess, but the truth is out there, and you should want to seek the truth and not hide and continue to be sheeple in terms of you know leaning toward the old ways, or leaning toward, just because the way you was brought up is a certain way, doesn't mean that you can't change, you can't evolve, you can't grow out of that. Nobody wants to look upon the situation and say, well, my parents did the best that they could, and what you're doing is saying that they didn't do a good job. We're not attacking individuals, okay? We recognize that, but what we're attacking is the fact that we have been led astray, and we have to fight back against that. And as any domesticated people, whatever you're taught, you pass on to the next generation, period. So we have to unlearn some of the docile ways that we have been taught as a people. We have to unlearn the individuality angles that we are teaching our family structures in order to pursue greatness. Because as an individual, that's the whole point of how capitalism works. If they keep us separated and they keep us operating as individuals but not as a black community and a black people, then they continue to work us against each other. So we have to move back to concentrating our power base as black people, and don't allow them to name that as extremism or something negative. recognize that these words will be used against you in order to prevent you from being your true self. And that's it.
So to carry on and to jump on the back of that, I would want to start off by saying that the Bible is not bad. The Bible is a tool. Every religious book can be used as a tool. Specifically, I also wanted to say that Jesus literally was against the structure of religion during his time. He was totally against everything that they created Christianity to be. And the persecution that Jesus spoke of when going against the grain was breaking away from religion. And that is the truth that will set you free. When it talks about study to show yourself approved, it means study the things outside of what you are being told. Go above and beyond, go deeper and deeper, as far down the rabbit hole as you can reach, so that you can have a full awareness of understanding, and your own understanding. At some point, you got to begin to trust your own heart. At some point, you got to begin to grasp, ask, and pray for the understanding of God and love to come into your life so that you can make better decisions, so that you can move according to the truth, the way, and the light. If you choose to be um boggled down by religion, it is a choice that you are making with the amount of information that's available for you to go and research just to get knowledge. You don't have to change your religion. You don't have to stop going to church. You don't have to stop reading your Bible. You don't have to do none of those things to grasp new information so that you can understand what you believe better. At this point, I just want you to understand what you believe and why you believe it better. Who told you that certain things were evil? Who told you that certain things was demonic? Why do you believe that? What is your experience to say that these things have to be evil or negative? And is your experience based on the perception, projection, and understanding of those that do not want you to believe in yourself more, that do not want you to be greater? And then I wanted to also mention that they acknowledge that the military has used telepathy.
Hmm.
That's knowledge. You can go and look it up. um they have acknowledged so many things that they will tell you that you shouldn't use or that doesn't exist, to keep you stifled. And when I say they, I'm talking about whoever provided the information for us to learn to tell us that this is right and this is wrong. It doesn't, it's not a one person or one thing, because there are some things that unknowledgeable black people will tell you is wrong just because somebody told them to tell you it was wrong. They haven't done any research. They don't know. They have no idea about most of the Bible coming from the Egyptian history and all of the way. From my understanding and my belief system is that it is the Bible is a spiritual book, a book that contains a lot of spiritual information. Um, any book can be spiritual if you have a spiritual awareness where you can get something spiritual out of it. I watch movies that ain't got shit to do with God, Jesus, or anything else, and I can get some real spiritual things
You
from it.
know, Dr. Casey, you know right about now, there's about half our audience saying that your house is gonna get struck by lightning.
Hey, listen. Me and God good over here. Me and God real good. Listen, I smoke my weed and pray. I probably pray and talk to God more than people that don't smoke. That they ain't going, that go to church 4 or 5 times a day. Because there's some people that go to church in the morning, they go home, they go to church in the afternoon, they go home, they go back to church at night. You don't need to do all that, because all of that is not going to get you the understanding that you're going to get if you keep learning the same information. You learning the same scriptures every year. You're learning the same information year after year. I'm not telling you that I'm right, but I'm saying that the right information is available for you to go and look at it so that you can begin to compare your notes. You got years of notes. I know they telling you to write notes every time you go to church. You need to start comparing your notes to history and weigh the value of truth, knowledge, and science. And sometimes science doesn't even capture it because they can't quantify spiritual things. But it's dangerous to be a martyr, to be a trailblazer, to be somebody to say, you know what, that's not right. I'm not doing that. You become the black sheep. You become the ugly swan or whatever the hell you want to call it. You become everything that people don't want to be around because you've decided to do something different. Want to say thinking not strange. Don't be discouraged because sometimes the person that is the black sheep of the family, you realize as you get older, they were the
Mhm.
one that wasn't dumb, blind, dusted, or disgusted. That was the person that you should have gleaned to. And I'll leave it at that.
Hey, great talking to everyone. I think Bill's probably the only one here that sees my pre-show ritual. So, uh, so, Dr. Casey, all I can say is we have a lot in common. But so, uh, I'm glad for our audience tonight. Glad we had a great discussion. I thank everyone that came and those that are watching. Have a great week, everyone. And like you said, read a book, get involved, learn something.
Audio
Read,
books are your
read.
friend if you don't want to sit down and read an actual book. Get
Thank
listen.
you, thank
I
you.
got this
Hey,
iPod has about 200 approximately 200 audiobooks on it. I went and bought an iPod
I,
just for audiobooks. It's 120 something gigs and this is for nothing
I,
but books.
I bought a fire tablet for the same reason. When I travel, that's the only thing I use it for. Is all my audio books are on there. But yeah, like as they said back in my generation, free your mind and your ass will follow.
There you
Have a
go.
good week, everyone.
All
Talk to
right.
you
Yeah.
next Monday.